Europe is often spoken of as a single civilization with many accents, a shared past, shared values, shared inheritance. Yet its history keeps returning to the same quiet contradiction. The closer its systems grow, the more visible its divisions become. Power expands and lines appear. Order deepens and frontiers harden. What looks like fragmentation is often born from attempts at coherence. This tension has lingered for centuries, not as chaos, not as failure, but as a recurring condition of how authority and meaning organize human life. This inquiry looks at why Europe has remained divided by language and frontier across long stretches of history. Not as a catalog of wars or treaties, not as a story of nationalism alone, but as a recurring pattern shaped by how power seeks order, how belief stabilizes authority, and how systems manage difference. The focus is not on one era, but on repeated arrangements, moments when governance, language, and control align, and moments when they quietly strain against one another. In much of early Europe, division was not drawn sharply. Power traveled through relationships. Loyalty moved through kinship, obligation, proximity. Speech shifted slowly from valley to valley. Meaning changed by degrees. Authority was personal before it was territorial. In such conditions, borders were not lines, but zones. Control faded with distance. Order depended on presence. A ruler's reach was felt more than it was mapped. This looseness carried stability of its own. Difference existed, but it was not yet formalized. Variation did not require classification. Language drifted without demanding allegiance. The pressure began when systems grew larger. As authority stretched outward, it needed ways to hold space without constant presence. It needed repetition, predictability, recognition. The early tools of administration were not abstract ideas but practices. Records, taxes, commands, rituals. Each required consistency. Each preferred clarity. Difference, once tolerated, became friction. The expansion of empires introduced a subtle transformation. Power no longer relied only on who stood nearby. It depended on what could be counted, named, and enforced at a distance. This required simplification. Language began to matter differently, not as culture, but as utility. Shared speech reduced error. Standard terms reduced negotiation. Authority moved more smoothly where words aligned. The Roman world illustrates this tension. Latin organized administration, law, and command. It did not erase older languages, but it ranked them. Some became official. Others receded into private life. Order did not eliminate difference. It reorganized it. When imperial authority weakened, something revealing occurred. The borders did not suddenly break apart. Instead, variations long contained became visible. Speech patterns hardened into markers. Regional practices surfaced as identities. What appeared to be fragmentation was often the exposure of what had been held together by force and routine. The system had not created unity, it had managed diversity. As political authority fluctuated, belief offered another kind of order. Christianity spread not only as faith, but as structure. It brought calendars, offices, rules, and hierarchies. It mapped meaning onto space. Dioceses drew boundaries. Jurisdictions defined obedience. Sacred authority required organization. Even belief required administration. For a time, this overlay softened fragmentation. Shared doctrine allowed different peoples to imagine themselves within one moral horizon. But belief, like power, demanded clarity. Orthodoxy needed edges. Heresy needed names. Authority required limits. When theological unity fractured, those limits became sharper. The Reformation did not only divide belief, it reorganized territory. Confession and control aligned. Rulers chose doctrines. Populations adjusted. Language, worship, and governance began to converge. What had once been a shared religious framework turned into a map of difference, not by accident, but by necessity. Stability required alignment. Alignment required distinction. Language rarely announces its political role. It feels intimate, familiar, unchosen. Yet across Europe, language slowly became infrastructure. As states centralized, they standardized law. Courts required uniform terms. Schools repeated approved forms. Administration favored consistency. Speech that fit the system advanced more easily than speech that resisted it. This was not always imposed through force. Often it happened through reward, access, mobility, recognition. Over time, certain languages became gateways to authority. Others persisted at the margins, spoken at home, preserved in ritual, passed quietly between generations. Their survival was not always rebellion. Sometimes it was inertia, sometimes affection, sometimes simply habit. But the effect accumulated. Language became a marker of inside and outside, of center and periphery, of belonging and distance. The system did not invent difference, it arranged it. Borders followed similar logic. They were rarely drawn first for identity. They were drawn to manage administration, taxation, defense. They simplified responsibility. A frontier answered a practical question. Where does authority stop? Once drawn, it began to shape meaning. Laws changed at the edge. Obligations shifted. Protection differed. Over time, people adapted. Practices aligned with jurisdictions. Loyalty followed structure. What began as an administrative convenience hardened into a sense of separation. Frontiers became places of heightened awareness, of control and uncertainty, of negotiation and surveillance. They were not merely lines, but conditions. And because systems change unevenly, borders rarely stayed still. They moved, adjusted, reappeared. Each adjustment left traces. Memory accumulated. The map became layered with past decisions. Modern Europe inherited these layers. The rise of nationalism reframed them, but did not invent them. Language, already tied to administration and authority, became a symbol of belonging. Political legitimacy began to rest on cultural coherence. Identity was simplified to stabilize power. This simplification came with consequence. It turned fluid distinctions into fixed categories. It encouraged the belief that language naturally maps onto territory, that borders express something ancient and essential. Yet many of these alignments were recent, contingent, the result of earlier pressures to manage complexity. Even integration projects carried this tension. Attempts to reduce borders often required new systems, new rules, new centers of coordination. Each layer of order introduced its own forms of distance. Unity, again, demanded structure. Structure implied limits. The pattern repeated without announcement. Across centuries, the same logic appears in different forms. Power seeks stability. Stability requires legibility. Legibility favors uniformity. Uniformity generates edges. Those edges accumulate meaning. They become identities. They feel permanent. But they began as solutions. This is the quiet rhythm beneath Europe's divisions. Not a single cause, not a single conflict, but a recurring response to scale, to growth, to the challenge of governing complexity without losing control. Language and frontier are not accidents. They are residues of administrative thought, of belief organized into systems, of authority trying to hold. The system does not intend to divide. It intends to function. And yet, division persists. If borders and languages emerge from attempts to create order, not from a desire to fragment, then a quieter question lingers beneath the history. When we seek stability today, in institutions, in identities, in systems meant to manage uncertainty, what kinds of divisions are we quietly accepting as necessary? Perhaps the deeper pattern is not European at all. Perhaps it belongs to how humans translate meaning into structure and structure into control. Perhaps every effort to make the world legible leaves behind lines that outlast their purpose. And perhaps those lines remain long after the reasons for drawing them have faded. continuing to shape how people recognize one another and where they believe the edges still are. Subscribe to Timeless Questions for more thoughtful journeys into the ideas and forces that shape civilizations and continue to shape us.